Before the flicker of fire lit up the night, there was darkness, deep, unbroken, and absolute. To understand the significance of light in human history, we must begin by immersing ourselves in the world before flame. This chapter invites you to step back tens of thousands of years into the lives of early humans who lived in caves, walked the forests, and existed under a sky only faintly illuminated by the moon and stars. The prehistoric night was not a gentle one. For early humans, darkness was both physical and psychological. Without the luxury of fire or artificial light, nightfall signaled vulnerability. The familiar disappeared as daylight faded, shapes distorted, sounds amplified. The world that had felt manageable during the day now became the realm of the unknown, of predators, spirits, and the imagined. Archaeological evidence suggests that early hominins, such as Homo erectus, likely began to fear the dark, not just because of what it concealed, but because of how it affected their social and physical routines. Humans are not naturally nocturnal. Our eyesight is poorly adapted for night, and our bodies are built for the rhythms of daylight. For these early communities, sunset marked the beginning of a long, vulnerable period where survival became passive. In the absence of light, productivity ceased. People slept huddled in caves or makeshift shelters, relying on group proximity for warmth and safety. But what did they think of the night? While we may never fully know, cave paintings and burial sites give us a few clues. In places like Lascaux and Chauvet, the darkness of deep caves served not as terrifying voids, but as sanctuaries for ritual and symbolic art. These early expressions, perhaps inspired by dreams, myths, or visions, indicate that darkness wasn't only feared, it was revered. It was the domain of transformation, of the unseen forces that early societies struggled to understand. Still, the night imposed limits. It shaped sleep cycles, social behavior, and even the development of language. Some anthropologists theorize that storytelling may have emerged around communal nighttime gatherings. Without fire or light, people would have clustered closely in silence or in shared tales to pass the hours. Darkness demanded stillness, and from that stillness, imagination was born. Shadows on cave walls may have danced with the movements of unseen flames, hinting at the kind of magic that only night can bring. There's something humbling in realizing that for most of human existence, night was not conquered, it was endured. Our ancestors adapted to its rhythms as part of nature. The lunar cycle would have been profoundly important, as moonlight made certain nighttime activities possible. Hunting, migration, or even sacred rituals might have been timed according to the waxing and waning of the moon. Animals, too, would have been a defining presence. The howls of wolves, the rustle of unseen creatures in the underbrush, the silent flight of owls, all these sounds and sensations shaped the prehistoric imagination. Nighttime was not just a sensory experience, it was emotional, mythological. Every rustle could mean danger. Every unexplained sound could be a spirit, a god, or a predator. Before flame, the stars would have been our ancestors' only map. In this vast, starry canopy, early humans may have found meaning, patterns, stories. Constellations offered not just navigation, but narrative. Oral traditions possibly emerged as ways of remembering and teaching through the night, connecting stars with gods, seasons, animals, and ancestry. Thus, the sky became both ceiling and scroll. This relationship with the dark is echoed in myths across cultures. In Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime stories, in African folktales, and in the earliest oral traditions of Europe and Asia, night is not merely a backdrop, but a character, alive, listening, watchful. The world before fire was not silent or empty. It was loud with uncertainty, alive with imagination, and steeped in mystery. Early hominins likely developed sleep patterns very different from ours. Polyphasic sleep, sleeping in multiple segments rather than one long stretch, might have been common. This made sense in a world where continuous rest posed risk. One person remained alert while others slept. Rotating watchfulness offered a kind of primitive security system, keeping predators and danger at bay. The darkness also cultivated early belief systems. The absence of light encouraged speculation. What caused the sun to disappear? Why did stars move? What spirits dwelled beyond vision? The seeds of religion, astronomy, and cosmology were sown in these mysteries. The night sky, with its shifting constellations and lunar phases, became an ever-changing tapestry on which to project stories of gods and monsters. Interestingly, even the way ancient people built shelters reflected their relationship with darkness. Deep cave dwellings offered more than physical protection. They created controlled environments where darkness could be both feared and harnessed. Art on the cave walls wasn't exposed to daylight, but hidden in the shadows. To see them, early humans had to venture deeper, likely using natural luminescence from fireflies, bioluminescent fungi, or simple grease lamps crafted from stone and animal fat, rudimentary but symbolic attempts to push against the void. But the majority of the night was lived under stars alone. With no artificial light, even the faintest celestial glow would have seemed brilliant. Our ancestors' understanding of time was lunar and stellar, not mechanical. A person in the Paleolithic would track time not by clocks, but by the phases of the moon, the rising and setting of constellations. Entire calendars and agricultural systems would emerge from this early stargazing. It's in these early nights that human imagination evolved. Fear, after all, is a powerful motivator. The after all, is a powerful motivator. The anxiety induced by shadows may have catalyzed invention. The desire for warmth, safety, and control gave rise to the first attempts at taming fire. But before fire was ours, night was a canvas of limitation and longing. And there's beauty in that struggle. Imagine a group of early humans nestled in a cave. The air is cold. The sounds of the forest echo from outside. A child stirs in their sleep. Elders whisper stories passed down from generations. Somewhere outside, an animal rustles. Inside, there's only breathing, heartbeat, darkness. Eventually, the fire would come, transforming that scene. But before we reach that point in this series, let's hold space for the millennia when darkness was the dominant force. It shaped biology, behavior, and belief. It connected humans with the heavens, with each other, and with their inner lives. The prehistoric night wasn't silent. It spoke in rustles, howls, stories, and dreams. It was not just absence, it was presence. It was the unknown and the unknowable, the feared and the revered. And in that endless night, humanity waited, not passively, but attentively. Imagining what light might feel like, dreaming even then of flame. As night descended, so too did the division between the known and unknown. The darkness drew a line between safety and exposure. Between the warmth of companionship and the isolating reach of unseen forces. For the early human mind, darkness became more than a time of day. It was a boundary between two worlds, one tangible and the other mystical. The earliest mythologies, though only reconstructed from archaeological traces and later oral traditions, show a deep reverence for the night. Cultures around the globe would later associate darkness with the womb, with creation itself. In many traditions, the universe was born from darkness. A cosmic void out of which all life emerged. This symbolic understanding may have its roots in the experiential reality of prehistoric night. It concealed, but it also inspired. In the absence of artificial light, humans would have observed celestial bodies with remarkable clarity. The movement of stars, the phases of the moon, and even rare meteor showers became woven into early cosmologies. These weren't just astronomical observations. They were spiritual and practical tools. Early humans may have used stars for migration, for predicting seasons, and for understanding their place in a vast and mysterious universe. Think of the role dreams may have played in shaping early thought. Without screens or light to fill the nighttime hours, sleep dominated the prehistoric schedule. Long hours of rest in the stillness of night could have induced vivid, memorable dreams. With no clear distinction between dream and reality in the early cognitive landscape, these nocturnal visions might have influenced storytelling, belief, and even early social norms. The night also gave rise to the earliest musical and rhythmic expressions. As families and tribes gathered to pass the dark hours, sound became a method of both entertainment and connection. Drumming, chanting, and vocal harmonies may have emerged from these communal moments in the dark, preceding even formal language. Echoes in the cave amplified these sounds. Turning gatherings into sacred performances that connected people with each other and the unseen world beyond. The human relationship with fear developed in tandem with this experience of darkness. Fear, in evolutionary terms, is a survival mechanism. It keeps organisms alert, ready to flee or defend. In the dark, with senses heightened and visibility reduced, fear ensured that early humans remained cautious. Over time, this fear transformed into a cultural force. It was encoded in myths of monsters, spirits, and curses. Stories passed on to children not just to entertain, but to warn. Even in early burial practices, the influence of night and darkness is apparent. Graves were often aligned with celestial bodies. Some burial sites included tools, beads, or shells. Items that may have served the deceased in an imagined afterlife. The darkness of death and the darkness of night were closely associated. Both representing unknown transitions into other realms. Light, when used in burial rites, likely symbolized passage, memory, and hope. This deep-rooted association between darkness and otherness shaped human consciousness. We began to define ourselves not just by what we could see, but by what we couldn't. The fear of the dark led to vigilance, the desire to light a fire, to cluster together. But it also fostered introspection. In the absence of visual stimuli, early humans turned inward, reflecting, imagining, dreaming. Darkness, in its own way, birthed the human soul. The invention of fire, which we will explore in the next chapter, didn't just create warmth or protection. It changed the psychological structure of human life. It allowed us to push against the night, to create safe zones where thoughts could be spoken aloud, where shadows could be kept at bay. But before that innovation, night taught us everything we knew about caution. About interdependence, and about storytelling. It's worth pausing here to reflect on how rare true darkness has become in the modern world. Most people today have never experienced a prehistoric night, one without headlights, street lamps, or digital devices. The sky once stretched above in full, brilliant clarity, with thousands of stars visible to the naked eye. The Milky Way arched like a brushstroke across the heavens. Today, many live their entire lives without ever seeing it. In reimagining that prehistoric darkness, we also gain insight into what it meant to be human before distraction. Before constant illumination. In those quiet, dark hours, there was space for emotional intimacy, for intergenerational wisdom, for the slow rhythms of breath and memory. Parents told children about spirits and heroes. Elders recited origin tales. A distant howl sparked debate. Was it a wolf or something stranger? Every noise was a question, every silence an answer. In that sense, darkness was never empty. It was a presence, full, watchful, unpredictable. It taught early humans patience and humility. It shaped not just how they slept, but how they felt, how they worshipped, how they survived. In conclusion, the prehistoric night was a powerful teacher. Before the flame was ever struck, before a spark lit a cave wall, darkness reigned. It ruled not with cruelty, but with authority. It required adaptation. It provoked imagination. And in its embrace, humanity began to define itself, not merely as a diurnal species, but as one capable of dreaming, storytelling, and ultimately, of mastering the elements. In the next chapter, we'll explore that mastery. The first fires, their discovery, their meaning, and how they forever changed the rhythm of night and the heartbeat of human culture. But before we leave this chapter behind, let's take a final moment to sit in the dark. Close your eyes. Let your mind quiet. Imagine the world as it was, still breathless, eternal, the whispers of leaves, the pulse of insects. A baby crying softly in the night. This was our beginning. Before the flame there was the dark, and in that dark we became human. Before we controlled flame, we borrowed it, from nature, from accident, from chaos. But once we held it in our hands, everything changed. To understand the history of light, we must sit at the edge of that first fire. Its heat brushing against cold skin, its glow casting long shadows across stone walls. This chapter explores the turning point when light became ours, when humans no longer endured the night, but reshaped it. It is the story of the first fires, not just as a tool, but as the beginning of community, safety, and belonging. Let us walk forward from the cave's edge, out of the moonlight, and into the flickering warmth of the world's very first hearth. The arrival of fire was not sudden. It came in fragments, through storm and chance. Lightning striking dry brush, lava erupting from the Earth's crust, wildfires igniting across dry savannas. At first, humans didn't create fire. They followed it, observed it, hunted its warmth, and feared its power. When a tree blazed after a lightning strike, perhaps an early ancestor crouched nearby. Drawn to the strange, untouchable light, its smoke may have burned their eyes, its flames may have repelled. Eventually, we learned to keep it. To preserve embers wrapped in leaves or bark. To carry coals across landscapes as we migrated. These glowing fragments became more precious than food. More sacred than water. Fire was not just warmth. It was continuity, memory, life. And then, after tens of thousands of years, we learned how to make it ourselves. The earliest known controlled use of fire dates back nearly 1.5 million years. In East Africa, at sites like Kubi Fora and Wonderwork Cave, researchers have uncovered ash layers, heat-cracked stones, and charred bones. Signs that fire was not only used, but carefully tended. Even so, early fire-making was laborious, flint on pyrite. The friction of stick and groove. It may have taken hours, sometimes days, to spark a flame. And once it caught, it had to be fed, carefully, lovingly, kept alive like a sleeping child. A single ember could sustain an entire group. And so, across the Paleolithic world, humans began to build their lives not just around fire, but because of it. Fire didn't just offer light, it gave protection. Before flame, nightfall meant retreat. Predators ruled the dark. Lions, leopards, wolves, all creatures of the twilight. But a fire's glow disrupted that dominance. Animals feared it. They avoided the scent of smoke, the hiss of flame, the crack of burning wood. With fire, the forest edge became a barrier. A group gathered behind its light was no longer prey in hiding. They were a force, a presence, one with heat and flame at their side. This newfound security changed everything. It allowed people to stay in one place longer, to sleep more deeply, to eat better, to talk more freely. Safety created time. Time created culture. At the heart of this transformation was the hearth. The hearth wasn't just a pile of glowing logs. It was the first architecture, the first altar, the first clock, the first kitchen. It marked the center of human life. Around it, people cooked meat, roots, grains. Fire unlocked nutrients from food that raw diets could not. It softened textures, killed bacteria, and made digestion easier. As a result, the human body changed. Jaw size shrank, digestion sped up, energy was redirected toward brain development. This wasn't just a cultural shift, it was a biological evolution. Fire didn't just warm us, it made us human. With fire came the first long nights of wakefulness. In a world without fire, night was for sleep and silence. But with flame, humans stayed awake longer. They talked, they sang, they told stories. Some anthropologists believe language itself may have developed around the fire, where faces glowed softly and sound traveled easily in the quiet. It was a place of intimacy, a space for memory, a seedbed for myth. In this way, fire created not just safety, but society. The hearth became a sacred boundary between light and dark, between us and them, between now and before. In many early communities, someone was always assigned to watch the fire. The role of the firekeeper emerged. A person responsible for tending the flame, feeding it wood, sheltering it from wind and rain, and ensuring it never went out. In later cultures, Zoroastrian, Celtic, indigenous American, the firekeeper became a spiritual guardian. The flame was more than warmth. It was presence, a connection to ancestors, a sign of the divine. It was said that if the fire died, something more than light was lost. In some places, embers were carried from one generation to the next. Families kept coals alive through births, storms, and migrations. When a new settlement was built, it was the fire that arrived first. Fire even changed the way we saw the world. Before, darkness divided our lives into two halves. Light to move, dark to hide. But now, light could be extended. People could work longer, speak later, plan, dream, build. The idea of future took root by firelight. By extending the day, fire reshaped the way we measured time. Nights were no longer empty spaces. They were hours lived, not just endured. And with those hours came vision, ritual, and reflection. Even today, the comfort of a fireplace, the flicker of a candle, or the glow of a campfire reminds us of that ancient feeling. That we are not alone. That warmth means safety. That light means home. But fire was never fully tamed. It still destroyed when forgotten, still escaped when fed too much, still burned when disrespected. And yet, it never stopped drawing us in. Even now, we stare at flames the same way our ancestors did, silently, hypnotically, as if the flickering dance speaks to something older than words. In the shadows it casts, we still imagine stories. In its crackle, we still hear whispers of the past. As we close this chapter, let us sit for a moment beside that ancient flame. Its warmth still touches our skin. Its light still traces the edges of our memory. This was the beginning of light as something lived with, a tool, a friend, a fire to pass down through generations. The hearth was the first circle, the first home, the first quiet revolution against the darkness. In the next chapter, we follow fire as it takes shape, poured into stone, lit with oil, and placed upon altars and window sills. From flame to lamp, from ember to elegance, we watch the evolution of light continue. But here, in the hush of this moment, we remember, it all began with a spark, and a place to gather around it. As communities grew, the presence of fire was more than a source of survival. It became a center of gravity. Entire social structures began to form around those who controlled or maintained fire. Among nomadic bands, the keeper of the flame held deep importance. This person ensured that the sacred fire carefully nurtured with embers, guarded against wind and rain, was always carried from one place to the next. A group without fire was a group exposed, and the firekeeper became both practical guardian and in permanent settlements, fire evolved again. It moved from open plains and forest clearings into enclosed spaces. Hearths were built into floors, then later raised into platforms. The concept of home began to form not around walls or roofs, but around fire. In fact, many ancient words for home or household are derived from terms related to fire or hearth. In Latin, focus literally means hearth. And even today, We speak of the home as a central point of focus or family life. From this fire-centered living came early rituals. Fire became a witness to life's milestones. Births, deaths, marriages, all took place in its light. Newborns were held close to the hearth to welcome them to the world. Ashes from the hearth were sprinkled over graves, connecting the living and the dead. These moments reinforced fire's spiritual role. It was no longer just for food or warmth. It marked the sacred transitions of life itself. As firelight extended into the evening, the culture of night changed. With illumination, early humans gained not just productivity, but reflection. Some of the earliest musical instruments, bone flutes, drums, rattles, may have been played around fires. Artifacts discovered near ancient hearths suggest communal feasts, dancing, and performance. These weren't just distractions from the dark. They were celebrations of togetherness, powered by the promise of light. The psychological impact of firelight should not be underestimated. Modern studies have shown that even brief exposure to firelight can lower blood pressure and reduce stress. The flickering, organic rhythm of flame may resonate with deep ancestral memory. A primal association between fire and peace. Unlike the harsh static glow of modern bulbs, firelight invites contemplation. It moves, it breathes, and in doing so, it seems alive. In some cultures, fire was believed to contain a spirit of its own. Greek mythology gave us Hestia, goddess of the hearth. In Rome, the Vestal virgins were tasked with maintaining the sacred fire of Vesta. Ensuring the eternal flame never went out. In Hindu tradition, Agni is the god of fire, invoked in rituals to bridge the human and divine. Among the Maori of New Zealand, fire is treated with reverence, tied to creation myths and ancestral wisdom. These diverse traditions share a common thread. Fire is not merely elemental, It is relational. It connects, reveals, transforms. Around it, humans did more than survive. They began to become themselves, and yet fire demanded responsibility. Children were taught early how to treat it with respect. Stories were told of spirits who punished carelessness. Myths warned of what happened when flame was stolen or misused. Prometheus, the titan who brought fire to humanity, was punished for his gift. The story echoes in many cultures. Fire is a gift, but it comes with a cost. Archaeological evidence also shows the progression of fire management. In Mesolithic and Neolithic sites, we see the emergence of structured hearths, stones arranged in circles or squares to contain the flame. Charcoal remnants indicate controlled burning techniques, while ash layers suggest regular maintenance. These signs mark not just technical skill, but cultural investment in light and warmth. The tools used to ignite fire improved over time. What began as friction between wood evolved into more sophisticated methods, sparked flints, iron pyrite, even compressed air techniques in some regions. These innovations marked a shift. Fire was no longer just found or preserved, it was produced on demand. This reliability changed everything. Planning, farming, crafting, all gained new dimensions once the day could be extended at will. Social structures also began to reflect fire's influence. Communities with established hearths developed more complex roles. Those who cooked, who maintained, who led rituals. With fire came not just light, but layers of meaning. A fire that burned steadily in the center of a dwelling mirrored the stability of that household. A communal hearth spoke to shared responsibility and trust. Fire also shaped space. Caves and homes were designed with ventilation in mind. Roof openings, chimneys, and later flues were engineered to accommodate smoke. This led to architectural innovations and a new understanding of domestic environments. The fire didn't just warm the space, it structured it. As the fire's role deepened, so too did its presence in symbolic life. Charred bones found in burial mounds point to cremation rituals. Burnt offerings in ancient temples, grains, incense, animals, demonstrate fire's role in sacrifice and supplication. The flame consumed the offering, lifting it skyward to gods. In doing so, it became a mediator between earth and heaven. Even in language, fire left its mark. Phrases like kindling an idea, a burning passion, or spark of genius all derive from the elemental impact of flame. In literature and poetry, fire is often a metaphor for life itself, its fragility, its brilliance, its transformative power. In some, the first fires marked more than a technological milestone. They ignited a cultural revolution. They offered light not only to see by, but to think by. They became the nucleus around which families gathered, traditions formed, and civilizations began to rise. To sit beside a fire today is to time travel, to share in a ritual as old as humanity. Its glow still comforts, its heat still draws us in. It remains a universal symbol of home, of safety, of memory. And so, as we close this chapter, we look ahead to how fire evolved yet again, into oil lamps and torches, into symbols of state and ceremony. From the rough hearths of the Paleolithic to the polished lanterns of ancient cities, fire would take new forms, but its essence would remain, a light in the darkness, a story waiting to be told. Because before electricity, before gaslight, before candles, there was the fire, and it changed everything. Once fire had been tamed, carried, and cared for, humanity sought ways to shape it, to make it portable, contained, elegant. No longer just a heap of logs or a circle of stones, light began to be placed in vessels, guided by design and purpose. This chapter is the story of those vessels. The oil lamps of the ancient world, small, humble objects that, in their flickering glow, illuminated empires. To follow the light of oil and flame is to travel through Mesopotamian temples, Egyptian tombs, Grecian homes, and Roman streets. These lamps were not only practical, they were symbolic. They represented continuity, protection, divinity. And they mark one of the earliest moments when humans began to mold fire into art. Let us walk through the world's first cities and see how civilization itself began to burn, gently, through wick and oil. The earliest known oil lamps date back to over 10,000 years ago. Simple shells or carved stones filled with animal fat, with a wick of moss or bark. These primitive designs evolved across millennia into clay and bronze vessels with carefully shaped nozzles, reservoirs, and handles. In ancient Mesopotamia, some of the earliest city dwellers used terracotta lamps in temples and homes. These lamps burned sesame oil, precious and fragrant. Their glow lit rituals to gods like Ishtar and Marduk, their flicker casting divine shapes on mud brick walls. In Egypt, oil lamps became essential to the spiritual journey. Light was associated with life, with the sun god Ra, who sailed his solar bark across the sky by day and through the underworld by night. Tomb paintings often depict lamps beside the deceased. A guiding flame for the soul's passage. Some lamps were even buried with the dead, meant to burn in the next world. Egyptian lamps were elegant, crafted from faience, alabaster, or metal. They burned oils from plants like castor and balanos. Some were shaped like lotus blossoms or sacred animals, reinforcing the belief that light was divine. A bridge between the mortal and the eternal. In Greece, the lamp took on new forms. Ceramic molds allowed for mass production, and every household had several. The Greeks refined wick technology, improving the control of flame size. Lamps were often dedicated to household gods, placed on altars during meals, rites of passage, or nighttime prayers. One of the most beautiful Greek rituals was the Panathenaic torch race, where runners carried lit torches through the streets of Athens. The light symbolized both victory and continuity, passed like an unbroken thread from one generation to the next. By the time of Rome, the oil lamp was ubiquitous. In Roman cities, thousands of lamps burned each night in villas, baths, temples, and taverns. The Roman Empire mass-produced them, stamped with decorative reliefs. Gladiators, mythological scenes, Christian symbols. They were the ancient world's version of branded goods, with maker's marks and regional styles. These lamps often burned olive oil, a staple of Roman agriculture. The supply lines for oil extended across the empire, from Hispania to North Africa. Light, in this sense, was imperial. It moved with trade, taxation, and conquest. Some Roman lamps had multiple nozzles, creating a chandelier effect. Others were suspended from ceilings on iron chains, lighting entire atriums or workshops. The public baths were especially famous for their complex lighting. Mirrors and bronze lamps reflecting off steamy marble, creating an atmosphere both functional and theatrical. But beyond the grandeur, there was something deeply personal about the oil lamp. Its light was modest. It did not blaze. It glowed. It lived in corners, on bedside tables, in shrines, on the ledges of windows. It was the light of mothers nursing children, of scribes copying scrolls, of shopkeepers counting coins, of lovers meeting in secret. Oil lamps were also portable memory. Soldiers took them on campaigns. Pilgrims carried them to temples. Lamps found in catacombs and graveyards often bore inscriptions. "May you find light," or "To my beloved rest in brightness." In this way, the lamp became more than a tool. It was a vessel of care, of continuity, a symbol of hope in the dark. Light became layered with meaning. In Judaism, The eternal flame of the menorah symbolized divine presence. In Hinduism, the diya lamp represented knowledge and victory over ignorance. In early Christianity, oil lamps were hidden in catacombs, lighting the way for persecuted believers. To light a lamp was an act of prayer, of reverence, of resistance. What's remarkable is that these ancient objects, so small and fragile, have survived by the millions. Archaeologists uncover them in ruins, in tombs, in garbage heaps. Some are simple clay dishes, others are intricate bronze work, preserved with soot still clinging to the wick. They are echoes of hands long gone, hands that struck flint, poured oil, lit flame. People who, like us, feared the dark, who craved warmth, who found meaning in a flickering light. As technology advanced, the oil lamp remained. Its shape evolved, but its essence did not. Even in later centuries, oil lamps would illuminate monasteries, caravans, and homes until displaced finally by gas and electricity. But for thousands of years, the lamp was how humanity carried the light. It crossed deserts, boarded ships, lit scrolls and scriptures. It fed the imagination of empires. It burned in silence, beside stories now lost. To imagine the ancient world at night is to see it through oil's golden glow, soft, smoky, sacred. As we leave this chapter, take one last look at that simple vessel. Burning beside a Roman bed or a Greek hearth. Smell the faint sweetness of olive oil. Watch the shadows stretch across mosaic floors. This was the light of the ancient world. Next, we'll watch it change again, as wax replaces oil, and candles begin to shape the light of the medieval night. The story of oil lamps is as much about innovation as it is about adaptation. As civilizations grew in complexity, from city-states to empires, the demand for reliable, portable, and safe sources of light became more pressing. Fire alone, though essential, lacked the mobility and precision that new ways of living required. The answer came in the form of contained flame, the lamp. The basic principles of the oil lamp are elegant in their simplicity. A vessel holds a flammable liquid, usually animal fat, olive oil, sesame, fish oil, or linseed. And a wick is placed so that it soaks up the liquid and burns steadily. This concept allowed light to be moved, focused, and prolonged. From household settings to temples, palaces, and city streets, oil lamps enabled people to extend their day far beyond the setting sun. In ancient Egypt, lamps were often made of terracotta or carved stone. Designs ranged from the purely functional to the ornately symbolic. Some were shaped like lotuses or eyes, others inscribed with hieroglyphs or adorned with images of gods like Ra and Anubis. In many homes, lamps were lit at dawn and dusk in rituals that honored these deities. The flicker of flame was thought to repel malevolent forces, keeping the household safe. The Greeks refined lamp design significantly. One of their innovations was the use of covered nozzles and shallow basins to control fuel consumption and airflow. Greek lamps were mass-produced using molds, enabling consistency in both form and function. This standardization meant oil lamps became affordable and widespread. Nearly every Greek home, from peasant huts to philosophers' studies, would have possessed at least one. For the Greeks, lamps were more than utilitarian. They were symbolic. In philosophical texts, light is often a metaphor for knowledge, clarity, and virtue. In Plato's allegory of the cave, the movement from shadow to light represents the journey from ignorance to wisdom. Thus, in the very act of lighting a lamp, one partook in a cultural gesture toward enlightenment, literally and figuratively. The Romans expanded both the scale and sophistication of lamp use. With an empire that spanned continents, lighting became not just a domestic concern, but a political and urban one. Cities like Pompeii and Rome used oil lamps in public baths, marketplaces, and along streets. Bronze and terracotta lamps shaped like animals, mythological figures, or even erotic scenes were common. These designs reveal not only Roman engineering prowess, but also their cultural values, humor, and spiritual beliefs. Roman oil lamps were so central to daily life that entire industries emerged around their production. Workshops specialized in lamp making, and certain lamp makers even stamped their names into the clay, an ancient form of branding. Lamps became gifts, status symbols, and offerings. In burial sites, they accompanied the dead, guiding souls through the darkness of the afterlife. In the Middle East and Mesopotamia, oil lamps played both practical and ceremonial roles. Clay lamps were commonly found in ziggurats and temples. In some traditions, the continual burning of a lamp represented divine presence. The eternal flame concept, later adopted by various cultures, has roots in this region. The idea that a flame should never be extinguished suggests not only reverence, but constancy, purity, and connection with the divine. In Jewish tradition, the menorah is perhaps the most enduring symbol of sacred light. This seven-branched lampstand, originally used in the temple in Jerusalem, is described in the Torah in exacting detail. Its flames were to be kept burning continuously as a testament to divine light. The story of the oil that lasted 8 days during the rededication of the temple, commemorated during Hanukkah, is a celebration of miraculous light in a time of darkness. Eastern traditions also held light in high esteem. In ancient India, lamps filled with ghee or sesame oil were central to religious rituals. Deepavali, literally a row of lamps, celebrates the triumph of light over darkness and knowledge over ignorance. Small clay lamps called diyas are lit and placed in windows, temples, and riverbanks. The light does not merely illuminate space, it invokes divine presence, purity, and hope. As lamp technology traveled across regions, through war, trade, migration, it evolved. In China, innovations included the use of whale oil and elaborate lantern casings made of silk, paper, and wood. These lanterns, used in festivals and ceremonies, often featured poetic calligraphy and vivid artwork. They not only functioned as sources of light, but as storytelling devices, each design reflecting local myths, historical events, or seasonal cycles. Trade routes like the Silk Road helped spread lamp styles, materials, and ideas across continents. A lamp in a Roman villa might have had design elements originating in Persia or Egypt. Conversely, Chinese lanterns might reflect the influence of Indian religious symbolism or Arabic geometric design. This cross-cultural pollination reveals that light, though practical, was also deeply expressive of identity. Lighting was also hierarchical. The wealthy enjoyed intricately crafted bronze or glass lamps with sculpted stands and multiple wicks, while the poor made do with simple single-wick clay vessels. But regardless of design or expense, all lamps served the same essential purpose: to push back against the dark. As we examine archaeological records, it becomes clear how deeply embedded lamps were in the emotional lives of ancient people. Some lamps were shaped as animals, doves, lions, or fish, possibly to convey spiritual protection or ancestral symbolism. Others bore inscriptions, prayers, dedications, or brief poems. One Roman lamp reads, "Utere Felix," use me happily. Another, "Fidelis amicus," faithful friend. In literature, lamps often appear at moments of transformation. A hero reading sacred texts, a lover waiting in solitude, a scholar writing late into the night. In these scenes, the lamp represents more than sight. It represents presence, thought, and human resilience. Even warfare was influenced by lamps. Signal fires and beacons, often fueled by oil, transmitted messages across great distances. A single flame on a mountaintop could mean danger, victory, or change. The strategic use of light in the military became an early form of communication technology. From a scientific standpoint, the oil lamp was one of the first tools that taught humans about combustion, airflow, and fuel dynamics. Observing how the wick absorbed oil and how the flame danced with the wind laid the groundwork for more advanced understandings of chemistry and physics. Early engineers would later draw upon this knowledge to invent gas lamps, then electric bulbs. In all of this, what remains striking is how such a small, contained flame could carry so much meaning. The oil lamp is one of humanity's earliest engineered objects, but it is also one of its most poetic. It bridges the practical and the profound. It allowed humans not only to see their world, but to shape it, decorate it, worship within it, and dream beyond it. In the next chapter, we will explore how candles emerged from this lineage, how wax, wick, and ritual converged to create another powerful medium of light. But let us not forget the oil lamp, humble and enduring, that lit the path of civilization for thousands of years. When oil lamps had reached their golden age, another form of light began to emerge. Slender, upright, and slow to burn. It was a quiet revolution, one made of tallow, wax, wick, and flame. The candle. Its light was steadier than oil, its form more portable, more refined. And its glow, soft and golden, would come to illuminate everything from medieval monasteries to royal coronations, from scriptoriums to shrines, bedrooms to ballrooms. This chapter is about the candle's rise, how it changed the way we lived, prayed, worked, and even dreamed. Candles likely developed in multiple regions independently. The Chinese were crafting them from whale fat as early as 200 BCE. In India, wax from boiling cinnamon was used to produce temple candles. In the Americas, indigenous peoples made similar objects from oily tree nuts or insects. But it was in the Roman world that candles as we recognize them today began to spread. Romans used tallow, rendered animal fat, to produce small, practical candles for domestic use. These candles were not elegant, but they were efficient. The problem with tallow was its smell. It burned with a sooty, greasy smoke. In tightly packed cities like Rome and later in medieval towns, the smell was unmistakable, pungent, sour, animal. But even so, candles thrived. They were easier to carry than lamps. They didn't require containers of liquid oil. They could be molded, shaped, stored, bundled. The wick could be trimmed to control brightness. They were perfect for travel, for writing, for quiet work at night. The real transformation came with beeswax. Unlike tallow, beeswax burned clean. It released a sweet, honey-like scent. It didn't smoke or gutter as badly. It produced a bright, clear flame, but it was far more expensive. Beeswax was the luxury light source of the Middle Ages, reserved for royalty, nobility, and the church. Step into a Gothic cathedral and look upward. The vaults are lit with beeswax candles mounted in iron chandeliers. The flickering light casts color through stained glass. Shadows dance along carved stone saints. This is not simply illumination, it is mysticism. The candle in these contexts symbolized divinity, the soul as flame, the presence of God as light. In Christian Europe, the Easter candle was lit as a sign of resurrection. In Jewish tradition, the menorah and Sabbath candles offered sacred continuity. In Hinduism, the diya flame remained central to prayer and celebration. Candlelight was not only functional, it was ceremonial. Monasteries became the candle's keepers. Monks in abbeys across Europe spent hours dipping wicks into vats of wax, building layer upon layer, until they had candles that could burn through the night. These were used in scriptoriums, where sacred texts were copied by hand in the dim hours of evening. One monk, one quill, one candle. The glow allowed the copying of scripture, poetry, and science, books that would define European knowledge for centuries. But outside the monastery, candles were far more humble. The average medieval household relied on tallow, often handmade at home. Families melted fat from cattle or sheep, poured it into molds, and set wicks from flax or cotton. These candles were precious. They were rationed. A single taper might need to last a week. By the 13th century, candle making had become a guild craft. In London, chandlers set up shops, buying tallow in bulk, pouring hundreds of candles per day, and selling them by the bundle. Markets smelled of fat and wax. Workers bore the scars of hot molds and fire. Even kings needed chandlers. Royal households burned thousands of candles each year in bedrooms, chapels, corridors, and banquet halls. Records show enormous budgets allocated to wax procurement, particularly in France and England. The flicker of candlelight shaped not only sleep, but imagination. It is by candlelight that some of the greatest works of the pre-modern world were composed. Shakespeare's earliest audiences watched his plays by torchlight and taper. Galileo may have looked over his notes by the soft flicker of beeswax. Candles lit the desks of composers, poets, and revolutionaries. The 17th and 18th centuries brought refinement. Molded candles became more uniform. Decorative candlesticks, of brass, silver, or porcelain, turned light into status. Chandeliers held dozens, sometimes hundreds of candles, suspended over ballroom floors. Wealthy families dined by candlelight. Their faces glowing in gold. Mirrors were placed behind candlesticks to multiply the light. Reflective wall sconces became popular. Ornate designs that caught and scattered the flame. But for all its elegance, candlelight still held practical challenges. It melted unevenly. It smoked when extinguished. It needed constant trimming and supervision. Fire risk was ever present. Families went to bed with caution, always aware of the dangers of a toppled candle or a forgotten taper. And yet, we remember it fondly. Even now, we light candles for romance, for ritual, for remembrance. A single flame holds more emotional weight than 1,000 LEDs. It flickers, it dances, it breathes. The candle became a metaphor for life, for love, for the fragile beauty of time. By the 19th century, candles began to decline. Gaslight, and later electricity, offered cleaner, safer, brighter options. Candle making became industrialized. Paraffin wax, stearic acid, machine-molded precision. But something had changed. Light no longer had to be earned. Before, to have light at night required labor. Gathering, melting, dipping, trimming. Candlelight came with cost and ritual, with smell and touch and memory. That is what we lost when we turned the switch, but we did not forget. Today, we still light candles to mark what matters. A vigil, a birthday, a prayer, a moment of stillness. We hold them at weddings and funerals. We light them in churches and windows. We watch them burn during storms and stories, because somewhere deep within us, we still remember the wonder of wax. A quiet taper on a wooden desk, the golden light on parchment. The hush of a world half lit, half shadowed. The candle was not just a tool, it was a companion. And as we close this chapter, we leave behind the smell of beeswax, the glimmer on glass, the soft warmth against the cheek. The candle's rise was the light of the private world, the flame of thought, of faith, of love. Next, we step out into the city, into the colonnades of Rome, the streets of empire. Where light meets architecture and darkness meets design. Candles, while seemingly simple, were products of precise craftsmanship. The earliest versions required sourcing suitable materials, which varied greatly by geography and available resources. In parts of Europe, beeswax was most accessible, valued for its clean and steady burn. In regions where bees were less common or wax was costly, alternatives like animal fat, known as tallow, were used. Tallow, made from rendered beef or mutton fat, was inexpensive but smoky and pungent, often leaving behind a grease. The process of candle making was labor-intensive. Tallow had to be melted and purified multiple times to reduce odor and impurities. Wicks, made from twisted fibers of cotton, hemp, or flax, were carefully dipped in the melted fat or wax over and over again, each layer cooling before the next was added. The repetitive dipping created the solid, cylindrical form familiar to us today. These handmade candles, often uneven and fragile, were time-consuming to produce and not widely available to common folk use. In medieval monasteries, the art of candle making was refined and elevated. Monks, with their access to beeswax through apiaries and their devotion to religious ritual, became some of the most skilled candle producers in Europe. Within cathedral walls, beeswax candles burned brightly on altars, their sweet, clean aroma believed to purify the sacred space. The contrast between a beeswax candle in a cathedral and a tallow candle in a peasant's hut mirrored the social and spiritual hierarchies of the time. The symbolism of candles deepened during this period. In Christianity, the flame represented Christ as the light of the world. Candles were lit to accompany prayers, to mark the passing of time in vigils, and to honor the dead. Candlelight vigils remain a poignant tradition in many cultures today, born of this medieval practice of linking light with memory, reverence, and the divine. As the medieval period transitioned into the Renaissance, candle production expanded alongside increased urbanization and commerce. Guilds formed to regulate the craft, especially in larger cities. In France and England, chandlers, professional candle makers, operated as essential tradespeople. They managed workshops, employed apprentices, and maintained standards for candle quality. Their shops became centers not only of light production, but of local economy and gossip, lit by the very products they made. The homes of the wealthy might display candles in ornate holders made of silver or bronze, while the poor made do with iron sconces or even carved niches in stone walls. Candlelight began to influence interior design. Rooms were arranged to maximize reflection and diffusion. Mirrors and polished surfaces helped bounce the light, making modest candles seem more effective. Evening became a time not just for sleep, but for sociability. Letters were written, music was played, and stories were told by flickering. In literature and the visual arts, candles were rich with metaphor. A single candle in a dark room symbolized hope, knowledge, or fragile life. A guttering flame marked the passage of time or the proximity of death. Paintings from the Dutch Golden Age, with their skillful use of chiaroscuro, often centered on candles to dramatize light and shadow. In Rembrandt's work, for example, the candle was not just an object, but a source of emotional tension, casting doubt, comfort, or contemplation. Candle usage also helped reshape ideas about timekeeping. Before standardized clocks were widespread, candle clocks were used, where marks along a taper measured hours as it melted down. In some Buddhist temples in China and Japan, giant candles were burned to denote days of meditation. These flame-based chronologies tied human rhythm to organic decay, making time not a rigid abstraction, but a sensual, visible process. The candle's role in ceremonies continued to flourish across global cultures. In Jewish Sabbath observance, candles are lit to usher in a sacred day of rest and reflection. In Hindu homes, lamps and candles called diyas are essential to festivals like Diwali, symbolizing inner light and the victory of good over evil. In Catholic churches, votive candles are lit in front of saints' statues as acts of devotion, each flame a personal prayer. These traditions persist because the act of lighting a candle is The development of scented candles can be traced to antiquity, but gained traction in the Middle Ages, when apothecaries experimented with blending herbs, flowers, and resins into wax. Lavender, myrrh, rosemary, and frankincense were common additives, used to mask the odor of tallow or to provide therapeutic benefits. In wealthier households, these fragrant candles enhanced not only light, but atmosphere, paving the way for modern aromatherapy. With the age of exploration came new materials. The introduction of whale oil and bayberry wax provided alternatives to tallow and beeswax. In colonial America, settlers discovered that boiling the berries of the bayberry bush yielded a green wax with a pleasant smell. However, it took enormous quantities of berries to produce even a small number of candles, making them a luxury item. By the 18th century, industrialization began to transform candle making from a craft into a commodity. Molds were developed, allowing multiple candles to be produced quickly and uniformly. The invention of stearin and paraffin waxes in the 19th century, both cleaner and cheaper than traditional materials, made candles more accessible. These changes democratized light, bringing it into every corner of society, yet they also marked the beginning of the candle's decline as a necessity. Despite their reduced role in lighting, candles never lost their symbolic power. In moments of intimacy, spirituality, remembrance, or celebration, we still turn to them. They're lit at birthday celebrations, romantic dinners, power outages, vigils, and sacred altars. The soft glow of a candle remains uniquely evocative. More than just light, it is ambiance, memory, and meaning. In reflecting on the rise of the candle, we see a journey not only of material evolution, but of human intention. From tallow and beeswax to stearin and soy, each shift tells a story about the values, challenges, and desires of the time. The candle stands as a beacon of continuity, connecting us across centuries in the simple sacred act of lighting a flame. As we transition to the next chapter, we move beyond the private glow of homes and temples to the wider world of streets and cities, where flame gave way to flame on a grander scale. Urban lighting would soon become not just a comfort, but a spectacle, transforming the night into a place of power, surveillance, and modernity. By day, Rome dazzled. Marble temples, bustling forums, fountains, markets, and monuments. It was a city of spectacle and empire. But what happened after the sun fell behind the Palatine Hill? What was it like to walk the cobbled streets of ancient Rome when day gave way to darkness? In this chapter, we step into the shadowed heart of one of the world's greatest cities to explore how its people navigated the night, how light, and the lack of it, shaped Roman life after sundown. Unlike modern cities with their endless streetlights, Rome's illumination was limited, uneven, and deeply class-bound. While the elite dined by the flicker of oil lamps and torches, the poor often lived in deep, unlit tenement quarters. The night in Rome was not uniform. It was a landscape of light and shadow, security and threat, sacredness and secrecy. The primary source of nighttime lighting in Rome was the oil lamp, fueled by olive oil, and carried or set in bronze or clay holders. These lamps illuminated homes, bathhouses, and temples. In wealthier households, lamps might be set in decorative sconces, suspended in hanging chains, or arranged on elaborate candelabra. But even so, the light was dim, flickering, smoky, and localized. Rome did not have a structured system of public lighting as we know it. Streets were dark, particularly in poorer districts like the Suburra, which became notoriously dangerous after sunset. Thieves, gangs, and drunken brawlers often filled the unlit alleyways. It was said that respectable citizens avoided traveling at night unless accompanied and armed. To walk through Rome at night meant embracing its darkness. Many carried torches or were accompanied by torchbearers, slaves or hired servants who illuminated their master's path. These figures were so common that they appeared in poetry and satire, symbols of both wealth and caution. In the wealthier districts near the Forum and Palatine, public buildings and colonnades might be lit during festivals or important gatherings. The temples of Vesta and Janus, closely associated with fire and transitions, burned sacred flames both day and night. But these exceptions only highlighted the general scarcity of artificial light. Festivals were a different matter. During Saturnalia, the city was transformed. Torches lined the streets, banquets spilled outdoors, singing and laughter echoed across piazzas as families and strangers mingled in temporary joy. Light became a symbol of inversion and excess, turning night into a carnival of warmth and celebration. Theatrical performances, too, offered rare public illumination. Amphitheaters and open-air stages used torches and oil pans to extend performances into the night. The famous naumachia, mock naval battles held in flooded arenas, featured dramatic lighting, fire, and shadow to heighten the spectacle. But these were not nightly occurrences. They were grand exceptions. Within Roman homes, lighting was carefully managed. The atrium might host a central lamp for the household, while bedrooms and studies had small portable versions. Light shaped daily rhythm. The elite might stay up late to read, write, or host guests, while laborers woke with the dawn and slept soon after dusk. Interestingly, light also carried symbolic power. In Roman religion, lamps and torches were part of ritual life. Brides were accompanied by torchbearers to their new homes. Funerals included lamp processions to guide the dead into the afterlife. Vestal virgins maintained the sacred fire of Rome, never allowing it to go out. Its flame was not merely symbolic, but protective. It was said that if the flame died, Rome itself might fall. In private rites, families lit lamps to honor household gods, the lares and penates. These spirits guarded the hearth and the pantry, and their favor was sought through offerings and light. In this way, domestic lighting wasn't just functional, it was spiritual. Shadows also had meaning in Roman imagination. Writers like Pliny the Elder and Seneca the Younger often reference the interplay between light and shadow as metaphors for truth and illusion, power and fear. The shadow was not simply absence, it was presence with weight. In Roman frescoes, light and shadow played across faces and architecture, signaling status, depth, and emotion. Night brought with it not only physical darkness, but mythic danger. The boundary between the living and the dead was considered thinner after sundown. Ghosts, omens, and restless spirits were believed to wander the streets. Protective charms were hung in doorways, and children were warned to stay indoors. Poets and historians alike noted that political plots and illicit affairs were often carried out under the veil of night. In the dim corners of taverns or the shadows of basilicas, whispered conspiracies were born. Darkness was both ally and adversary. Roman nightlife, therefore, was cautious, layered, and deeply dependent on one's status. The patrician might dine by the soft glow of a silver lamp. The gladiator might sit in a smoky corner of a bathhouse, lit by dripping tallow torches. The beggar might crouch in complete darkness beneath a crumbling arch. What united them was fire, flickering, imperfect, but vital. As Rome expanded, so did its infrastructure, but the night remained stubbornly personal. There were no gas lights, no electricity, no guarantees. The city's beauty faded into mystery, its grand columns and statues reduced to silhouette and memory. To be Roman at night was to negotiate shadow. It meant knowing the curve of your street by feel, not sight. It meant trusting your torchbearer. It meant praying that your lamp would not go out before you reached home. And so we remember Rome not just in marble and mosaic, but in flame. In the smoky trail of an oil lamp, in the hush of temple torches, in the silence between footsteps on a stone road after dark. This was the city where night was never fully tamed. As we close this chapter, we prepare to enter sacred spaces, monasteries, temples, mosques, and shrines, where light became more than survival. It became spiritual revelation. In the next chapter, we explore how flame became faith and how the darkness became divine. Rome's approach to night and light was far more sophisticated than we often assume of the ancient world. While oil lamps and torches served the needs of individuals and households, the broader urban environment demanded organized illumination, especially as the city's population swelled and infrastructure expanded. The empire's ambition extended not only to roads, aqueducts, and forums, but to the very structure of nocturnal life. One of Rome's unique contributions to nighttime organization was the establishment of a quasi-police force known as the Vigiles. Formed in the 1st century BCE under Augustus, the Vigiles were responsible for fire prevention, night watch, and street patrol. Equipped with torches, they walked the streets after dark to enforce order, watch for suspicious behavior, and respond to emergencies. Their presence offered reassurance to citizens while reinforcing imperial power and visibility even after sunset. While Roman lighting did not include continuous street lamps like those of the modern era, public places were often dotted with standing lamps or braziers. Particularly in high-traffic areas such as bathhouses, temples, and marketplaces. Wealthier neighborhoods sometimes pooled resources to place lamps outside their domus, lighting up facades and entryways. Archaeological evidence from cities like Pompeii and Ostia reveals carved niches in walls, probably for oil lamps or torches, along with soot marks, evidence. These public lights were fueled by olive oil, an abundant resource in the Mediterranean. But oil was expensive, and not all neighborhoods were equally lit. Wealth and status determined access to artificial light. The wealthiest Romans could afford multiple lamps, polished reflectors, and even glass-covered lanterns that protected the flame from wind. In contrast, the poor often relied on moonlight or small handheld lamps when moving through the city after dark. Shadows, then, played an enormous role in Roman nightlife. Alleyways between insulae, the towering, crowded apartment blocks, were likely pitch dark at night. These narrow lanes were breeding grounds for crime, rumors, and myth. Roman literature and graffiti speak of ambushes, stolen goods, and secret rendezvous taking place in these unlit pockets of the city. Darkness, to the Romans, was not just the absence of light. It was a moral and narrative space. Poets and philosophers often wrote of night as a realm of freedom and danger. In Ovid's Fasti, night is where lovers meet and schemes unfold. Seneca warned of the dangers lurking in the shadowed corners of the city, using darkness as both a literal and metaphorical veil. Petronius, in his Satyricon, describes nocturnal banquets and nighttime brawls, revealing a social world animated by low light and lower inhibitions. At the same time, the beauty of Rome by torchlight was widely acknowledged. Light bouncing off marble columns and gold-leafed mosaics would have created a cityscape of flickering elegance. Grand processions, religious, political, or celebratory, were staged at night, with torchbearers leading the way. These illuminated rituals allowed emperors to demonstrate control not just over people, but over the night itself. Temples and sacred sites also employed lamps that burned continuously, tended by priests or attendants. The Vestal Virgins, for instance, maintained Rome's sacred hearth fire in the Temple of Vesta. The constant flame was not only a spiritual duty, but a symbol of Rome's eternal strength and divine favor. The presence of light in religious life added a layer of sanctity to nocturnal visibility. Romans also understood the psychological effects of light. In wealthier homes, interior courtyards and atriums were designed to catch and hold sunlight during the day. At night, these same spaces became dimly lit sanctuaries, illuminated by oil lamps placed strategically to enhance mood, conversation, and contemplation. Light was not simply functional, it was aesthetic, emotional, and performative. Within elite Roman households, dinner parties, convivia, often stretched into the night. Candelabra, ornate, multi-armed lampstands, cast dramatic light over couches, dishes, and entertained guests. Slaves were assigned to manage the lighting, ensuring that lamps remained full and wicks were trimmed. A well-lit dinner setting was not just practical, it was a display of luxury, taste, and hospitality. Theatrical performances and public games occasionally extended into the night. Temporary lighting rigs were constructed to allow for nighttime entertainment in amphitheaters and arenas. Though rudimentary by modern standards, these setups underscore Rome's commitment to maintaining cultural life after dark. Firelight dramatized the spectacle, casting elongated shadows that played into the theatricality of Roman performance. Shops and taverns, especially those near city gates or busy forums, often remained open into the evening. Lanterns hung above doorways not only to attract customers, but to declare safety and legitimacy. A lit shop suggested reputable trade, a dark one, suspicion. This simple correlation between illumination and trust persisted well into modernity. As with so many aspects of Roman life, lighting became a symbol of imperial reach. Rome exported not only infrastructure and law to its provinces, but the rhythms of its daily and nightly life. In distant cities like Londinium, Lutetia, and Antioch, Roman standards for public lighting, safety, and ritual were introduced and adapted. Nightlife under Rome was more than localized. It was a trans-imperial experience. Despite this, darkness retained its cultural mystique. Festivals like Saturnalia blurred the boundaries between day and night, order and chaos. Lamps and candles were lit in abundance during these celebrations, turning night into a carnival of light and laughter. But once festivities ended, the shadows returned, and with them, the quiet power of the unknown. To walk through ancient Rome at night was to navigate a world of contrasts. Grand columns and dingy alleys, sacred flames and criminal plots, noble intentions and hidden desires. Illumination, however partial, revealed as much as it concealed. As we close this chapter, we leave behind the torch-lit forums and lamp-lined villas of Rome. Ahead lies the spiritual realm, where darkness and light were not merely physical phenomena, but moral forces. In our next chapter, we'll explore how religious traditions across the world used light to express devotion, truth, and transcendence.